Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast. All right, I am on fantasy overload now. I think the nation is. I think the world is. Clearly, by the amount of people that watched these these shows, um, there's this fantasy overload. Whose bright idea was it to put them all on at the exact same time? That's the first question I have. Like, was it
HBO and Amazon?
No, I know, but I understand that. But like, which one was like chicken and egg? Like, which one was like, we're gonna put out House of the Dragon here?
Since we knew about the Lord of the Rings show for maybe 5 years before it actually came out, I'm gonna put the blame on HBO for this one.
Okay.
Because House of the Dragon we only knew about a year ago. You know?
Yeah. That's fair enough. I think that's a very, very good blame card to go around because
if we're gonna blame,
I will blame. I have no problem blaming.
Yeah,
I will definitely blame.
I know.
Not that I mind. So here's what I'm going to tell you right now. Okay, between the two shows, I lied. We're not really pitting them against each other because, quite frankly, I enjoyed both of them. I will give you a gun to your head question at the end, which is very predictable, and you'll know exactly what it is. But what's not predictable is what you will say. That's why I enjoy asking you those questions. But they really are two sides of the same coin. And I read an interview with the showrunner for House of the Dragon, and he was basically talking about how George R.R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones in response to Lord of the Rings, and kind of, it's a, Lord of the Rings is supposedly, medieval fantasy, whatever, and George R.R. Martin wanted to show like the dark side of things, and Lord of the Rings is more of, well, it's epic, it's a quest, it's a little more clean and polished, it's a little, less grim and gritty.
Yeah.
And
he's very famous for saying he wanted to get into the intricacies of things. Say like Aragorn at the end of Lord of the Rings becomes the king, and then supposedly like everything is happily ever after.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but what was his tax policy? And
right.
Like,
right.
What if he was like a miserable king and he hated being king or something like that? So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so it's so this description of it just fits. Like, so I binged House of Dragon 1 through 3, mainly because my wife wanted to watch with me, but we could not pull together a time where she was in the mood to actually sit down and watch TV. She's not a real big TV person, but she likes Game of Thrones. That used to be our show. We'll navigate it at some point. But I told her, I was like, Hassan is going to grill me if I don't watch these 3 episodes, so I have to watch them. She understood. She's like, you got to do what you got to do. And so I binged all 3.
On my side now.
She's on your side. No, actually, she's on my side. I keep telling you, I'm exhausted at the end of the day, and I want nothing that's like heavy because we got kids and stuff. So she's like supporting my argument that it's really tough to get into stuff that's really heavy and heady. One thing I did notice about binging the first 3 episodes, even though quite frankly I binged the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones way back when, but that was pre-kids, so it's totally different. I feel like they really make the show for week to week. I felt like it was very fast. Like the chronology of things went really fast. But I feel like had I waited the presumed week in between, so in the first episode of, Game of Thrones, of House of the Dragon, it's, it's just the first, passing of the torch to the new king. And then by episode 3, it's like 9 years have passed or 6 years have passed or whatever, it's some massive time jump, which I found fascinating too, because as opposed to, let's say, the final season of Game of Thrones, the original Game of Thrones didn't feel rushed, but it's definitely surprising that much time passes in such a short amount of actual time. Like 3 weeks pass and it's, 6 years. I thought that was kind of fascinating.
It's very different in narrative style from the original show.
Right. Which makes me kind of wonder. It's like, and again, I'm not a book reader. I'm not a fan. I'm the geek. You're the nerd. You've read the books. You've read all the books that House of the Dragon is based off of, correct? The book, I should say.
It's not really a book to read. It's more like an encyclopedia.
Okay.
But I've read most of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have read the other books that the original show is based on.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, it's definitely something to where it doesn't feel rushed, amazingly enough. But I definitely think a week to week format like this is made for week to week format. This is made for you need to take a deep breath in between things. But it's surprising because Matt Smith, who's fantastic, by the way. I love him because you think from the first episode he's going to be like this Joffrey like jerk, and he is, but he's got a side to him that he has his own ethic code. He has his own moral code. He has, his rules, I think, that he lives by. So I almost feel like he is the most rogue character, just to take a cue from our own show title. He kind of does things a little different. He does things his own way. And whether you view that as
The
being
Maverick.
like, what's that?
He's
A
a
maverick?
Maverick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whether or not you view him as likable or unlikable, that's I think up to you to decide. But he doesn't care. As a character, he doesn't care. He's going to do it. He's going to do what he thinks is right. Or I mean, maybe right's not the word, but the way he wants to do it, right? And in between episodes 2 and 3, I mean, holy cow, there's this entire war that's been going on with the crab feeder guy, and it's over like instantly, and it's like one of those things where I'm like, wow, that could have been a whole season. I almost feel like like if this was Game of Thrones, the original Game of Thrones, that would almost be like an entire season, with this battle and this hunting down the crab feeder guy. And the thing also that I thought was interesting is the fact that, unlike the original Game of Thrones, they don't have, they do have a good cast of characters, but it's so self-contained to, obviously, the House Targaryen that it's, not as expansive as what Game of Thrones is in terms of going, I mean, Game of Thrones is this, King's Landing and all of Westeros, and it's got, all these different places and all these different, characters, and then they're balancing. So it's almost a testament. It's almost giving a shout out to the original creators of Game of Thrones and George R.R. Martin himself too, obviously, for managing to pull off a show, the original, so well up until the last season. Whereas now Lord of the Rings, I go to Lord of the Rings and I'm like, man, they're world building. Like I feel like they are actually world building way more than what the House of the Dragon is in, at least in the first 2 episodes. And I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them for what they were. You've got your hobbits, you've got your elves, you've got things that are very relatable if you watched the movie, but I don't feel like you need to have watched the movies necessarily to enjoy this as a fantasy epic in and of itself. It's cool to know that she is Cate Blanchett's character and will eventually turn into Cate Blanchett's character, but other than that, there's nothing really too pressing. I feel like they're building their own world. And it's not easy to do that, right? I don't know. It's not easy to do that. Those are my takes from watching both fantasy epics in binge format, mind you. What was your initial reactions?
Those are your takes, though. But so one is world building and the other one isn't. That's basically your observation.
That's all you got out of that? Like I went through for like 10 minutes.
I mean, a lot of it was kind of whimsical and fanciful, this and that, but you didn't really make any kind of observation other than you like Daemon, you like you kind of like
I like them both
shows,
but I like them both for different reasons, and they can exist side by side for different reasons. And I think Lord of the Rings has a lot more legwork to do, to be honest with you, than House of Dragon. I think House of Dragon can lend itself to the fact that it's Game of Thrones. It feels like Game of Thrones, not just with the music, but but also just the style and the tone. Like they didn't diverge from the tone, which I think is
I think there's a lot of disingenuousness when it comes to that, because people are not acknowledging that there were pretty much 8 years of world building before House of the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So we walked into episode 1. We all knew what Dragonstone was, what King's Landing was, what Westeros was, who the Targaryens were, that they rode dragons, that all of that stuff. None of that legwork needed to be done.
Right.
And they didn't do it. reason that they didn't do it is because they knew it had already been done. They didn't bother to do that.
Yep.
So, like, I've seen some takes on it. It's like, well, they just got right into it. They didn't bother with this long, sweeping world building and this and that. They just got right down to the heart of it, and that's a better way of telling stories. And that's like, well, that's BS, because they've had a decade worth of world building. They didn't have to. It's kind of like if Star Wars, you know, the latest Star Wars movie decided to explain the Empire and the Rebellion, you know, to you all over again. There's no need to do it. So, you know, Lord of the Rings, even though it had 6 movies prior to this, the story of where the elves came from, now in Valinor, and, you know, why they are in Middle Earth, and where the hobbits came from, the Harfoots, before, you know, a lot of that stuff has just been in lore.
Exactly.
And so they kind of have to explain it, especially if they're planning to, you know, embellish a little bit and take a lot of creative license. So, I mean, they were in a rock and a hard place. They didn't have any choice but to sit down and kind of.
The original Game of Thrones built that in, like, it not just introduced a whole bunch of characters and juggled a whole bunch of characters, but it fleshed out entire worlds and entire lands and entire peoples to the point where, again, you knew everything, just like you said, you knew everything coming in. So there was no need to repeat that. It really is almost an extension of Game of Thrones versus its own thing. Whereas my take from Rings of Power, watching that, was no, this is kind of almost brand new. I mean, this is almost brand new. I mean, there's, again, you know who the elves are, but they are role players to me in, you know, you have a character who's an elf in the movies, right? But you don't, you know, and you know he comes from there, he has a little bit of backstory, but they're not, you know, because you only have, it's a movie, right? I mean, you only have so much time. You can't flesh this stuff out.
Also,
so now
the movie,
they have
the elves are basically leaving, so they're non-entities in most of the movies, because they're, you know, the reason that the situation is so dire is because the elves are not helping them with the ring, because the elves are like, we're out of here, man, we're going home, like, you know, this place sucks, so we're out of here. And so this is kind of, whereas Lord of the Rings was the end of the reign of the elves, this is the beginning, you know, this is where they came from. And the elves are kind of, everything with the Lord of the Rings is very difficult because a lot of it is metaphysical. And they don't, you know, the metaphysical, Tolkien marries the metaphysical and the reality or the physical in a very matter-of-fact way. But that's very hard to tell a story. Like, you know, that's like us talking about working on Wall Street, but there's angels, you know, every now and then you get visited by an angel. So it would be very hard to set that tone correctly in order for you to be able to accept that there are some really supernatural elements to the elves, along with the fact that they could also be killed if you stab them with a sword. You know, it's really hard to get that across. So yeah, the Lord of the Rings does have the help of the Peter Jackson movies and the several Tolkien books, both by both by Mr. Tolkien and his son Christopher Tolkien. But it really does have to dig its own ground and kind of stake its own. Now, look, it seemingly people were here for it. If you judge by the ratings, the number of people who watched.
Holy cow! Yeah.
Maybe that's just curiosity. We'll see how it goes this Friday. Maybe they were just curious with the first 2 episodes, and now we'll find out if the audience sticks around. So, I mean, look, I'm happy about Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. I'm happy that it's good, and then I'm happy that it's got such a it's got accolades, and it's had such a good reaction from the fans. I think it kind of proves how much a whole was missing from Game of Thrones, like how much the people were ready to love Game of Thrones again. You know, that obviously didn't go away. So I think they were really smart. HBO was really smart to get this up and running like a good 2-3 years after the last one, because it was 2019, I think, was the series finale of Game of Thrones. So by 2022 we got another series, So it's still in our hearts and minds, and
Yep.
we haven't, like, you know. And also HBO was pretty brilliant, because if they had done it a year from now and House of the Dragon had a chance to, you know, stake its claim with no competition,
Mm-hmm.
but Game of Thrones came around again, people might not have been in the mood for their version or their style
Sure.
of kind of grim fantasy storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have the both of them side by side. You know, maybe hopefully they will be able to coexist without there being a lot of negative competition and either or, and they can actually share the same space. It'd be interesting to see if that happens. They are two very different kinds of stories, and they're, you know, two very different kinds of basically almost different kinds of genre, because one is very grim dark,
Right.
and the other one is like really high fantasy. I mean, really high
Yeah.
fantasy.
Yeah, I know.
So we will see. But I agree with you. I did enjoy both of them. I was ready to enjoy House of the Dragon a lot more than Lord of the Rings. I was very skeptical,
Mhm.
or weary. I wasn't skeptical. I was more weary. Like, oh man, I hope this is not a dog's ear. You know, I hope I enjoy this. And I was happy that I did. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. But basically, I have nothing really negative to say about either of them, which is very strange. I feel very odd and kind of out of place, because I don't really have anything bad to say about either one of those things.
Well,
and that's weird. That's really weird.
What makes this question the hardest. Gun to your head. You got to watch one. And okay, I'll take you through. I'll take you into my head. A second here, as I pose the gun to myself.
By the way, like, am I confident that they're going to pull the trigger of this gun, or is it just like, come on, man, you're not going to shoot? I know. You know? Like, who's holding? It depends on who's holding the gun.
Why would they do this? I don't understand.
So, like, yeah, this is dumb.
Oh, Erin's got the gun to your head. Erin's got the gun to your head.
All right, yeah, she'll shoot. Okay, so.
Why would you do this? It doesn't make any sense. That's a great. Oof, I just came up with
clearly awesome. Erin wants me to pick a fantasy.
What a plot for a horror movie now. Gun to your head, and some random killer just put the gun to your head and asks a pop culture question.
That's kind of creepy.
Right? Yeah. Patent pending. Hey, you can't do it. This is us. Patent pending. Patent pending.
Well, that'll do it.
There are a lot of right. There are a lot of times. There are a lot of times where it just depends what I'm in the mood for, right? I'll say this. I started watching Lord of the Rings first. So I guess my instinctual answer would then be it's got to be Lord of the Rings, right? But then I got through maybe the first 20 minutes of Lord of the Rings. I had to stop. And I was like, all right, let me try House of the Dragons. I saw the first 15 minutes of House of the Dragon. And then I was like, I got to keep watching. And then I watched all 3 episodes. Then I went back to Lord of the Rings. So then my other instinct would be, well, maybe it's House of the Dragon. Maybe that's the one I want to see more. But just gut reaction, I'm like, I kind of like, because Lord of the Rings, or Rings of Power, I should say, we'll keep it distinctive. Because Rings of Power is such an unknown to me, I'm actually more curious. Does that make sense? Like, it's almost like Game of Thrones, I'm going to enjoy more, but I know I'm going to enjoy more. But there's a ceiling to how well I'm going to enjoy it, I feel. Versus Lord of the Rings, I don't know what that ceiling is, because it really is a total unknown to me. So I almost, gun to my head, I would say Lord of the Rings. Rings of Power. Even though I'm enjoying House of the Dragon more right this second.
So, gun to my head, which would I pick? And I can't. And there's no way to watch the other one even after the fact. Like 10 years from now, I still won't be able to watch the other one because I still have that gun to my head. Like, I have to choose the one.
I got to be honest. I never thought that far. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. There's always a loophole. You got to look for the loopholes.
That's a big. Well,
it's look. Erin's kind of violent. Okay.
Well,
I would agree with you.
The real question is that a future plot point in the horror movie we just created, called Gun to Your Head?
What, the fact that you can wait it out and you just come back to it? It's like, yeah, I'll watch Lord of the Rings.
Is there a wrong answer? Like, is Erin going to pull the trigger if you say Rings of Power, but not if you say House of the Dragon.
You're gonna have to come up with an answer for that, because like everyone's gonna go, yeah, but it's streaming. So like as soon as the person leaves with the gun, you could just sit down and watch.
I wouldn't watch anything. I would go get a new pair of pants. That'd be the first thing I did.
Always that extra sentence. I would agree with you. I would say probably Lord of the Rings, just because I'm curious to see where it goes. You know, I'm hoping they'll all, you know, when we have all 8 episodes, that we're going to be like, wow, that was really like on par with those movies. Yeah. You know, and that was another really fantastic addition of the Lord of the, you know, the cinematic, or the live action Lord of the Rings canon. So yeah, even though, because I kind of know, I don't know, what we're in for with House of the Dragon, even though I read the encyclopedia. I do know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to be portrayed. Sure. I don't know how well it's going to work out, or how beautiful it's going to be, or how ugly or how gross it's going to be. So yeah, I still want that, but I kind of know what's coming. I don't know what the Lord of the Rings is you know, going to do yet. And because this is basically fan fiction, because they couldn't get the rights to the Silmarillion.
Right.
Because Christopher Tolkien's like, no, I'm done. I don't even like the Peter Jackson movies. I'm done with this. Like, no one's making, you know, this estate is not allowing you to make anything.
Yeah.
So this is basically, but we still have the Lord of the Rings book, and we got the appendices, and we're making a show.
Yeah.
So, meh. All right. So, like, even if you give us the Silmarillion, we could probably make a fantastic show. But since you're being a big jerk, we're just going to make a show we can make out of the appendices of Lord of the Rings. So I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm curious to see what they do, and I'm really hopeful for them.
Yeah.
But basically what I would really do is I'd be like, you know what? I'm not going to watch either of them, because I really care about why Aaron wants to kill me in the first place for watching a fantasy show. And I would lull her into a false sense of security while secretly I've called 911. And then as soon as the cops come and get her, I'm going to watch both of them. I'm binge watch both of them. That's how the movie ends, by the way. You just like open your phone and you speed dial 911 while the person is like,
no, the movie ends in a meta way.
Their manifesto as to why they're holding a gun to your head in the first place.
No,
and then the cops show and take them away. And then
that's the middle of the movie. That's the middle of the movie. The end of the movie is that they then make a movie about your harrowing experience. And then the killer shows up at the movie. See, that's the thing. It's like, got to take it that step further.
Yeah.
Got to go meta.
Yeah, you're way more invested than I am.
I'm literally making this as soon as we get out of here. As soon as we're done with this, I'm putting this down on paper.
I'm just like, why is she holding a gun, dude? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. All right. What do you guys think?
Why do you care which fantasy show I like? I would honestly be killed, because I'd be too busy wondering, like, what are the nuances of this? Like, what's the purpose of this in the first place? So yeah, that's everything you could have done
today. Why do you do this?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be asking too many questions.
Ooh, I just had an idea as to why, but I'm not telling you. I've told the audience enough. It's my story. Stay away. Stay away. What do you guys think? Pour it into the comment section. We will be commenting and replying to you all week long. Go check out youtube.com/Rogue Matter. Go check out roguematter.com. Check out all the cool content we've got. We've got the next couple weeks. We've got the closing chapters of Seal of Fire, Until I Die. Kingdom of Tundo is coming to a close as well too. So a lot of cool stuff on the site. Go check it out. Next week we will go all around the Rogue. I want to dive into DC a little bit, because there's some back and forth with
stuff on the horizon for that.
Yeah. Well, not just the outer workings, but the inner workings. They're trying to find their Kevin Feige.
There's stuff on the horizon.
Yeah. They haven't found their Kevin Feige. They canceled DC Fandom for this year. They're doing a lot. They're doing a lot. So we're gonna dive a little bit. We'll go all around the Rogue, and we will, of course, dish on any latest news or trailers or anything cool that comes out in between now and then. We will see you folks next week. Hi guys, Mike Dolce here from the Rogue Wave podcast. If you like this video, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps us out. Leave a comment, let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes, and tune in every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern for a brand new episode of the Rogue Wave podcast.